All right, guys, Wes here. Welcome back to the channel. And it sounds like our time as the two Spider-Man are not over just yet, as it seems new DLC is on the horizon for Spider-Man 2, and we're going to talk about all of the details in this video. Insomniac's latest entry in their beloved Marvel universe was a huge hit, and is currently the fastest selling PlayStation exclusive of all time. We know Insomniac is working on other projects like Marvel's Wolverine, and it's basically confirmed at this point that there's going to be another Spider-Man game entering development within the next couple of years, but that doesn't mean work on Spider-Man 2 is done just yet. So in this video, we're going to go over everything that's come out recently about potential DLC for Spider-Man 2, the teasers that are in the game, and how it may end up introducing some fan favorite characters in the Marvel universe, as well as bringing back some others from the main game story. We have a ton of stuff to talk about in this video, so check the chapters to optimize your viewing experience, and let's get started. Do you remember the burning fury of changing hearts, the thrill of infiltrating palaces, and the electrifying bonds of the Phantom Thieves? Persona 5 Tactica invites you to relive that rebellion, but this time with a strategic twist. Real quick, guys, this video is sponsored by Atlas. Persona 5 Tactica is available right now on Xbox Series XS, Xbox One, Windows PC, Steam, PS4, PS5, and Nintendo Switch. Forget precognition and prepare for precision. Persona 5 Tactica reimagines the Phantom Thieves exploits as a turn-based RPG. Command Joker, Skull, Queen, and the gang as they navigate a complex new realm called Jail, a warped reality fueled by distorted desires. Face cunning shadows in grid-based battles, strategically utilizing each Phantom Thief's unique persona abilities, morph Joker's wildcard into devastating attacks, or weave supportive magic with Makoto. Every turn is a chance to exploit enemy weaknesses, chain devastating combos, and unleash persona transformations that'll leave shadows begging for mercy. But beyond the combat, Persona 5 Tactica pulsates with the same heart as its parent game. Forge unbreakable bonds with your confidants, deepen your understanding of their stories, and enjoy familiar and some brand new faces that made Persona 5 an RPG phenomenon. Experience a brand new adventure with the Phantom Thieves in this turn-based strategy game. Persona 5 Tactica is a fresh chapter in the beloved series, offering a unique strategic challenge alongside the electrifying Persona gameplay you know and love. So grab your mask, summon your persona, and dive into the distorted depths of Jail. The Phantom Thieves rebellion is far from over. Click my link in the description and play Persona 5 Tactica now. It's available on Xbox Series XS, Xbox One, Windows PC, Steam, PS4, PS5, and Nintendo Switch. And thanks again to Atlas for partnering with me on today's video. So the main thing that people have been talking about in regards to DLC for Spider-Man 2 is the introduction to Daredevil in Insomniac's universe. Daredevil was referenced several times in the base game, and while he's never been an A-list Marvel hero on the same level as like Spider-Man and the Avengers, he has a huge fan base largely thanks to his excellent Netflix series. Insomniac teased Daredevil in their games mainly by the plaque on one of the Hell's Kitchen buildings that read Nelson and Murdoch, and Spider-Man 2 senior director Brian Intihar was actually asked about it point blank during an IGN podcast, and when confronted with the Daredevil references, he simply said, "Stay tuned." There's also been a couple, or I guess we'll say a handful of references to the Hand found in Spider-Man 2, which is a criminal organization that Daredevil has faced off against many times. Given the fact that Spider-Man and Daredevil often cross paths in the comics, and they're expected to team up in the upcoming Spider-Man Freshman Year series on Disney+, it would make a lot of sense for Daredevil to have a presence in the Insomniac universe. Plus, we should all remember that when asked about Daredevil entering the franchise, Insomniac senior director simply declined to comment, which is basically a confirmation in today's day and age. So if Daredevil is going to show up, does that mean he's getting his own game, or is he going to be popping up in a DLC? Personally, I think there's a chance for both to happen. If a paid expansion comes out for Spider-Man 2, and it's looking more and more likely that that's going to happen, we're certainly going to be playing as Spider-Man, at least for the most of it. But what if the DLC introduced Daredevil to the Insomniac universe and had him teaming up with either Miles or Peter and let us control him for certain missions? Then at the climax of the DLC story, we could have a big combat section where we freely switch between Spidey and Daredevil the same way the base game allows you to switch between the two Spider-Men. This way, the DLC would still focus more on Spider-Man, but it would also serve as a super effective introduction for this version of Daredevil, and it will also lay the groundwork for a potential standalone Daredevil game in the future from Insomniac Games. This could all just be wishful thinking, but the number of Daredevil references in Spider-Man 2 is no coincidence, and I think it's super likely that he shows up in the DLC one way or another. Switching focus a bit, Insomniac's version of Venom was pretty amazing, and while he was physically intimidating and certainly an effective video game villain, a lot of longtime Spidey fans felt this new version of the character was pretty one-dimensional and didn't have the same kind of depth or moral ambiguity that the comic version does. Now, interestingly enough, Venom's voice actor Tony Todd recently shed some light in a somewhat indirect way. About a month after the launch of Spider-Man 2, Tony Todd revealed at an expo that out out of all of his dialogue recorded in the game, Insomniac only ended up using about 10% of it, which is actually pretty insane for such a high profile character. Now obviously it's normal for plans to change on a big video game during development, but I don't think I've ever heard of a situation where 90% of a character's dialogue was cut from the final version of the game, and the fact that this happened to one of the game's main villains makes this all the more puzzling. Plus, it's not like Tony Todd is some unknown voice actor. It's Tony freaking Todd, Star Trek Candyman. He couldn't have been cheap to get in the studio for this game, so the fact that 90% of his dialogue was cut is pretty insane. Now I have two theories as to why this happened. The theory number one is that Venom was originally going to play a much bigger part in the story and perhaps have a more involved role with the narrative, which would be the reason why there was so much unused dialogue. Now one of the main criticisms of this version of Venom is that he wasn't very talkative and he didn't have much characterization beyond just being a generic monster. I'm not saying you have to dislike this version of Venom, but there's no denying that he was much quieter than most other versions of the character, and if the original drafts of Spider-Man 2 story had him closer to his comic counterpart, it would explain why so much of Tony Todd's dialogue ended up going unused. However, my other theory is a bit more optimistic. It's entirely possible that with that much unused dialogue for the character, Insomniac is planning to do something more with him. Perhaps Venom is going to return in the rumored DLC. I mean, Kraven the Hunter was really the main villain of Spider-Man 2 story, so perhaps the DLC is where Venom is really going to shine and come into his own. I just find it very hard to believe that Insomniac would order so much dialogue for Venom if they weren't planning on using at least 75% of it. I can totally understand making cuts here and there for the sake of timing, but 90%, like, dudes, like, come on, it's pretty crazy. There's definitely something else going on here, and I'm willing to bet money that a good chunk of that cut dialogue is going to show up in a future DLC, because otherwise this makes absolutely no sense. Now, speaking of Venom in the DLC though, there is another rumor floating around that not only is Venom going to return in the DLC, but Miles Morales is going to end up getting his own version of the iconic symbiote suit. The symbiote arc is a huge part of any Spider-Man story, and Miles really hasn't had his own opportunity to deal with those challenges. The ending of the main story also made it pretty clear that Miles was going to be the main Spidey going forward, and Insomniac themselves have confirmed as much. So if they're planning on bringing Venom back for the DLC, it would make total sense to give Miles his own symbiote arc. But let's get a little wild here. I'm going to throw a curveball at you guys because I thought of another possible future for Insomniac's Spider-Man universe. What if Miles is going to get another spin-off game similar to his first one, but instead of dealing with a brand new story, he's now dealing with his own symbiote arc and his own conflict with Venom? What if the original plans to have a more talkative Venom just got too big for a game this size, and Insomniac was forced to cut most of Venom's moments, but they plan to repurpose them for a future spin-off game? It's totally possible that they're going to use all of the dialogue in a DLC, but don't you guys think that sounds like a pretty huge DLC? Like, why not repurpose all of those Venom dialogue into another spin-off game starring Miles Morales and then give him his own symbiote arc? We have no idea what the plot of Spider-Man 3 is going to be just yet, but I honestly wouldn't be upset about another spin-off game starring Miles Morales, especially if it means a stronger focus on Tony Todd's Venom and potentially a brand new version of the symbiote arc. And again, this is all just speculation on my part. It could be that this is a Venom game that we're getting for a spin-off and it's going to feature Miles Morales rather than Peter Parker, but like I said, I'm just kind of spitballing here. I'm absolutely positive that Insomniac has more plans for Venom, and the more I think about it, the more that it feels like those plans might end up being too big for a DLC, especially if they're already thinking about bringing Daredevil into the fray. Now, aside from Daredevil and a potential second Venom arc, there is seriously a ton of different directions that Insomniac could go with DLC, many of whom have already been teased in one of their games. Basically, everyone expects Wolverine to at least be referenced in Spider-Man 2 expansion before his standalone game, but other referenced characters include Doctor Strange, Wong, Carnage. Now, Doctor Strange and Wong were referenced many times throughout Spider-Man 2 in their base game. The Sanctum Sanctorum was even a part of the map in the 2018 Spider-Man game. Insomniac are almost certainly going to try to include Doctor Strange and Wong in a future project, be it a DLC or as major players in a Spider-Man 3 game. And as for Carnage, the seeds of his origin story were planted throughout the Marvel Spider-Man 2 final act, and Cletus Cassidy even got his hands on a symbiote at one point during the game before slinking off to an unknown location. Carnage is absolutely going to be a part of this universe going forward, and I have a feeling that Insomniac might want to use him as a selling point for the DLC instead of waiting to use him in Spider-Man 3. Again, all of these major characters hiding throughout Spider-Man 2 space game may end up resulting in a spin-off game or instead a DLC, but I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see. I think a Venom and Carnage DLC makes the most sense, and it would also be a good reason why 90% of Tony Todd's voice lines weren't used for Spider-Man's base game and are rather going to be utilized for a Venom and Carnage DLC. Now, as for when Spider-Man 2's DLC will be announced, my money is on Sony's next state of play. Obviously, we don't even have confirmation that a DLC is happening, but the seeds have been planted, and it only makes sense for there to be DLC, just like there was in Marvel Spider-Man 2018. 2019. As for a reveal, like I said, it's probably going to be at the State of Play in February or March. Sony typically likes to kick off the year with a showcase of what's to come, and since 2023 was a bit of a slow year for first-party content, I'm expecting them to bring their A game going into 2024 so they can reassure their fan base that they've got some awesome stuff in store for them. Spider-Man 2 does not have any confirmed DLC just yet, but with how much Insomniac has been teasing, I seriously doubt they're going to make us wait until Spider-Man 3 to get more Spidey content into the wild. Like I said, personally, my money is on a February or March State of Play with an announcement, but if that doesn't happen, I wouldn't give up hope just yet because it may pop up at a late spring or early summer showcase instead. We have to remember that it took Horizon Forbidden West almost a year to get a paid expansion, and God of War Ragnarok's big Valhalla DLC is coming out over a year after the base game's launch as well. So as much as I'd love more Spidey content as soon as possible, we may end up waiting another 10 to even 12 months for it. I think the most likely scenario is if they have DLC ready, it'll release sometime early 2024, but until PlayStation tells us otherwise, we have no idea. But what do you guys think about this? Do you think the DLC is actually in the works for Spider-Man 2, or are we just kind of grasping at straws here? And if there really is a Spider-Man 2 DLC in the works, do you think that we're going to get Daredevil, possibly Venom and Carnage? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button with your notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any future updates. And until next time, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.